Welcome back to Superbly Said, covering advanced English vocabulary. Today's critique examines a SpeakDuo instructional slide deck teaching idioms.
And real quick, visit SpeakDuo.com to meet people worldwide on video calls to build your English-speaking confidence.
Yeah, exactly. So diving straight into the feedback for this material.
Right, and just to establish the baseline here, the deck provides a highly functional, visually clean foundation. It has, relatable daily life examples, like making an omelet or organizing a bookshelf.
Which is great.
It is. And because that foundational material is so solid, our feedback today is going to calibrate to a really high level, pedagogical focus. We want to maximize the impact for those advanced language learners.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. The current lesson structure misses an opportunity to deepen learner comprehension by failing to distinguish these idioms from similar, more common alternatives.
Yeah, looking at the submitted notes, expressions like not too shabby and to go big are presented with just these single, simple definitions.
Right, like not too shabby is defined merely as surprisingly very good.
Which is true, but
But providing an advanced idiom with only a basic definition is, it's like giving someone a high-performance sports car, but only teaching them how to drive in first gear.
oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like they have the tool, but they lack the nuance to actually take it out on the open road.
Yeah, and that is the core challenge with advanced language acquisition. We have to consider the reality of the target audience here. Advanced learners, they already know the basic synonyms.
Right, they already know the word good.
Exactly. They know good, they know to put in effort. The weakness in this material is the lack of context regarding exactly when and why to use a specific phrase over a simpler one.
It's just giving them isolated definitions.
Yeah, without showing the nuanced boundaries of the words. Like, it doesn't explain why a learner might say to a colleague that their brain, couldn't compute the restaurant bill, rather than simply saying they didn't understand it.
Wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Go for it.
If I'm the instructional designer building this deck, aren't I risking overwhelming the learner if I put too much nuanced context on a single slide?
I mean, visual minimalism is important, sure.
Right. Shouldn't a slide definition be as simple and punchy as possible to avoid cognitive overload?
It should, but not at the expense of cognitive clarity. Simplicity is good, but false equivalence is really dangerous.
Ah, okay.
When we tell an advanced learner that not too shabby just means good, we are actually teaching them to use the phrase incorrectly. We aren't asking for a wall of text on the slide, though.
So what's the fix?
The suggestion is to incorporate a targeted nuance and context layer for each expression that directly contrasts it with simpler alternatives, specifically tailored for professional or academic environments.
Okay, let's actually walk through a concrete example of how this could look, because I think demonstrating this comparison is crucial.
Definitely.
Take not too shabby. Instead of just saying it means good, the critical nuance is that element of pleasant surprise, or, exceeding initially low expectations.
Precisely. If a learner is taking the IELTS speaking exam, right, in part 2, and describing a difficult group project, they wouldn't just say the result was good.
Right, that just falls totally flat.
It does. But if we add that layer of comparative nuance to the slide, they learn to say, given our incredibly tight budget and the lack of resources, the final presentation was not too shabby.
Oh, I see. The contrast teaches them that the idiom changes the entire tone to one of, modest, surprising pride.
Exactly. And let's look at another one from the deck, to keep track of.
Right.
The slide defines it as staying informed or monitoring a moving situation, and it uses the example of tracking coffees consumed in a day.
Which is a fine, simple example, I guess.
It is, but if we directly compare it to the basic alternative to watch or to monitor, the true nuance of keeping track of really emerges. It's specifically about managing complexity.
And that complexity needs a professional anchor, doesn't it? Like in a conversation with a boss, a learner wouldn't say, I am watching my emails.
No, that sounds super strange.
Yeah. But if the slide contrasts the idiom with simple verbs, the learner understands the utility. They learn to say, with a global team of 50 people spread across 4 time zones, it is incredibly difficult to keep track of everyone's individual project timelines.
That's a perfect example. The idiom implies an almost overwhelming amount of moving parts. So by contrasting the advanced idiom against the basic alternative, the learner finally understands the specific boundary of the phrase.
Okay, so providing comparative context completely changes the learner's mastery of the individual word. But moving outward from that, let's look at the overarching context of the entire presentation.
Right, zooming out of it.
The introductory framing of the lesson feels disconnected from the core vocabulary content, risking learner disengagement right at the start.
Yeah, the opening sequence is honestly incredibly jarring. It creates this sort of cognitive whiplash effect.
It really does. Looking at the flow, the material begins with this engaging video reference about the actress Priyanka Chopra Jonas playing a pirate in a movie called The Bluff.
Which is a great hook.
It's a fantastic high-energy pop culture hook. But immediately after that, the presentation follows with a promotional slide for a SpeakDuo app trial.
Right.
And then it just abruptly jumps to the phrase, "not too shabby," with an example about making an omelet.
It's like inviting someone to a swashbuckling pirate movie, and as soon as they sit down in the theater, you turn on the fluorescent lights and hand them a tax form to fill out.
That is exactly what it feels like.
The weakness here is the immediate abandonment of the pop culture hook. Because the Priyanka Chopra video context is dropped entirely after slide 1, the subsequent vocabulary list feels like a sterile, disconnected exercise, rather than a cohesive narrative journey.
But is the issue simply that it feels disjointed, or does this actually negatively impact the learning process? Like, does it matter?
Oh, it actively hurts retention. In educational psychology, there is a concept called schema activation.
Okay, break that down for me.
When the lesson opens with a pirate movie, the learner's brain loads a specific set of networks and expectations. Adventure, oceans, acting, Hollywood. The brain is primed to process information within that context.
Right.
So when the presentation drops that context entirely to talk about app trials and omelets, the learner's brain has to dump the pirate schema and load a completely mundane, unrelated framework.
Ah, I see.
It requires unnecessary cognitive energy, and it makes the vocabulary feel like a random assortment of dictionary definitions.
That makes a lot of sense. So, the suggestion is to utilize the existing opening media hook to contextualize the advanced phrases, creating a unified narrative thread that pulls the learner through the entire lesson.
Exactly. And this is incredibly straightforward to implement. We can use concrete examples right from the deck's own vocabulary list.
Like what?
Well, before defining what it means to be at the helm, connect it directly back to the intro. Show how a director is at the helm of Priyanka Chopra's new pirate movie. You're using the new idiom to describe the very thing you just asked the learner to watch.
Oh, I love that. Or you could take the phrase "to get pumped up," or even "to go big," and frame them in the context of actors preparing for major action roles.
Yes, exactly.
The slide could offer an example sentence like, "To play a convincing pirate, Priyanka had to go big with her stunt training."
That is a perfect execution. The vocabulary suddenly feels inherently tied to a real-world engaging topic. The learner isn't just memorizing a list, right? They are acquiring the specific language required to discuss a piece of media they were just shown.
It transforms a slide deck from a textbook into a cohesive narrative, which naturally brings us to the final phase of the instructional journey.
Right, the application phase.
Yeah, we've moved from how the information is defined to how it is contextually presented, and now we must examine how the user actually interacts with it. The assessment mechanisms rely too heavily on unstructured conversation, which may not adequately reinforce the precise usage of the target vocabulary.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most critical missed opportunity in the entire submitted material.
Let me just map out what happens in the deck for the listeners. After the vocabulary is introduced, there are these recurring breakout room slides.
Right.
And these slides simply ask users to discuss the previous expressions with your partners. And this text is accompanied by a cute graphic of a penguin holding a flag or riding a paper airplane.
Yeah, the penguin.
Now, I have to pause and push back on this assessment a little bit.
Okay.
Isn't open, unstructured discussion exactly what you want in a language-speaking app? Like, if the goal of the platform is to get people talking on video calls, shouldn't we just get out of their way, let them talk, and see where the conversation naturally flows?
It is a very common assumption. And on the surface, it sounds right. We want fluency, and fluency requires open conversation.
Exactly.
But the weakness is that entirely open-ended prompts cause learners to immediately revert to their comfort zones. It acts as a psychological safety net. We have to remember the environment here. An adult learner is on a live video call, often with a complete stranger, trying to manage their accent, grammar, and listening comprehension all at once. The anxiety is really high.
So when faced with a completely blank canvas, like a prompt that just says, discuss, they take the path of least cognitive resistance.
Exactly. Without specific constraints, a learner will naturally default to using the basic, simple vocabulary they already know.
Right.
If they are talking about a time they tried something difficult, they will avoid actively risking the use of a complex, newly acquired idiom like shoot your shot or playing for all the marbles. They will simply say, I tried.
Because it's safer.
Exactly. The lack of structure doesn't promote fluency. It actually prevents the active recall of the new material.
And I imagine the imagery doesn't help either. A cartoon penguin riding a paper airplane might be visually appealing, but it creates a total tonal mismatch for adult learners trying to master high-level professional idioms.
Yeah, 100%.
It subtly signals that the stakes of the exercise are low and infantile, rather than challenging and sophisticated.
That is a brilliant observation. The visual cues matter just as much as the text. The suggestion here is to scaffold these breakout room activities by providing highly specific, scenario-based prompts that actually demand the active recall and application of the new expressions.
So we need to move from a blank canvas to a structured framework that forces the learner to stretch their abilities.
Yes. We have to give them a reason to use phrases like to be in the zone or to shoot your shot.
Let's give some concrete examples of how to design those constraints. Instead of a generic discuss prompt with the penguin, the slide could offer targeted role-play scenarios that necessitate the vocabulary.
Exactly.
For instance, you are at the helm of a failing startup. You have 3 minutes to convince your partner to shoot your shot on a risky new product launch.
That immediately changes the dynamic. The learner is given a persona, a conflict, and a mandatory vocabulary constraint. They don't have to invent a topic of conversation out of thin air. They just have to execute the language.
Right, or alternatively, you can provide guided debate questions that anchor the phrase to their own professional lives.
Like asking, what is a tricky one you've had to navigate at work lately, and how did you handle it?
Yes, that forces the learner to actively map the specific nuance of the idiom, the idea of a subtle, hidden complexity, onto their own lived experience.
By structuring the prompt this way, we lower the anxiety of figuring out what to talk about, and we raise the cognitive requirement of how to talk about it. We force the active recall of the advanced idiom in a safe, constrained environment.
It's the difference between telling someone to build a house with no blueprints versus giving them the blueprints and asking them to focus entirely on laying the bricks perfectly. The constraint actually breeds creative, accurate usage of the language.
And when you combine that active recall with the comparative nuance we discussed earlier and the cohesive narrative hook at the pirate movie, the entire lesson just transforms. It respects the intelligence and the specific challenges of the advanced adult learner.
Well said. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. And now, it is time to put our listeners to the test with a quick review quiz of the vocabulary we've been discussing.
Oh, I love this part. Let's do it.
So we have 8 questions. For each one, I'll give you the idiom, and then we will read out option A, option B, and option C.
And make sure you are listening closely because these options can be a little tricky.
Exactly. Question 1. What is the best definition for the expression, not too shabby? Is it option A, to describe something that is surprisingly, actually, very good, quite impressive, or completely satisfactory?
Or is it option B, to officially label a specific old item as completely useless, heavily damaged, or entirely inappropriate?
Or option C, to actively prevent an incredibly complex situation from suddenly turning remarkably chaotic or disastrous? Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer for not too shabby.
And the correct answer for not too shabby is option A, to describe something that is surprisingly, actually very good.
Right. Just like our example earlier about telling your boss that the final presentation was not too shabby despite the tight budget.
Exactly.
Okay, question 2. How is the phrasal verb to keep track of accurately defined? Option A, to intentionally hide incredibly sensitive personal information to completely avoid a massive public scandal.
Option B, to properly stay informed about a specific thing or carefully monitor a constantly moving, changing situation.
Or option C, To rapidly experience a massive drop in physical stamina right after finishing a remarkably demanding sports event. Pause here if you need a moment to think about the definition of to keep track of.
The answer for to keep track of is option B, to properly stay informed or carefully monitor a constantly moving situation.
Yup, like when you have to keep track of 50 different employee timelines across 4 time zones.
That's the one.
Moving on to question 3. If someone manages to go big, what exactly are they doing? Option A, to forcefully demand an entirely sincere public apology following an exceptionally hostile corporate argument.
Option B, to accurately predict the highly uncertain outcome of an upcoming global political event using advanced math.
Or option C, to intentionally put a tremendous amount of intense effort into something or purposefully do it impressively. Take a second to pause if you need to think about what it means to go big.
And the answer for to go big is option C, to intentionally put a tremendous amount of intense effort into something or do it impressively.
Right, like how Priyanka Chopra had to go big with her stunt training for the pirate movie.
Exactly.
All right, question 4. What does a person mean when they say they are struggling to compute? Is it option A, to successfully understand or accurately logically make sense of a completely confusing and weird situation?
Option B, to systematically organize a remarkably complicated corporate process into easily manageable new categories.
Or option C, to deliberately manipulate an emotionally vulnerable colleague into successfully accepting a truly bad deal. Go ahead and pause if you need to think about.
The answer for to compute is option A, to successfully understand or make sense of a confusing situation.
Yeah, like earlier when we talked about telling a colleague that your brain just couldn't compute a really confusing restaurant bill.
Halfway there. What's next?
Question 5. Which of the following describes what it means to get pumped up? Option A, to securely contain highly volatile chemical substances inside a remarkably fortified underground laboratory.
Option B, to suddenly become extremely deeply excited, highly energetic, or incredibly enthusiastic about a new thing.
Or option C, to completely, unexpectedly, violently, completely dismantle a massive business structure from the very bottom. Pause the critique here if you need to figure out to get pumped up.
And the answer to what it means to get pumped up is option B, to suddenly become extremely deeply excited or highly energetic.
Yes, similar to actors getting pumped up before performing a major action sequence.
Definitely.
Okay, question 6. What occurs when a person is said to be in the zone? Is it option A, to physically detach a heavy wooden object from its original metal frame to secretly access a guarded room?
Option B, to rapidly, forcefully, entirely dismantle a massive business structure before fully recreating it from roots.
Or option C, to be absolutely, completely mentally focused on a task and currently performing at your absolute best level. Feel free to pause if you need to think about what it means to be in the zone.
The answer for to be in the zone is option C, to be absolutely, completely mentally focused and performing at your best level.
Like when an advanced learner completely loses their anxiety in a breakout room and is just totally in the zone speaking English fluently.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
Exactly. Question 7. What does it mean if you are trying to shoot your shot? Option A, to gravely take a risky chance and confidently try to successfully achieve something remarkably challenging.
Option B, to effectively completely utilize a remarkably great initial idea to make much further progress on projects.
Or option C, to violently disrupt an organized public gathering in order to forcefully draw immediate attention to policy. Take a pause here if you need to lock in your answer for to shoot your shot.
The correct answer for to shoot your shot is option A, to bravely take a risky chance and try to achieve something challenging.
Right, just like our role-play scenario where you have to convince your business partner to shoot your shot on a risky new product.
Perfect. And the last one?
Question 8. What happens when someone plays a game for all the marbles? Option A, to deliberately manually shatter a surprisingly heavy industrial object using a specially designed new tool.
Option B,
To engage in a remarkably high-stakes competition where the ultimate final winner simply takes everything.
Or option C, to efficiently, correctly, systematically, totally ignore completely all extremely difficult management advice. Go ahead and pause one last time to think about the phrase, for all the marbles.
And our final answer for what it means to play for all the marbles is option B, to engage in a remarkably high-stakes competition where the winner takes everything.
Exactly. Like stepping into a crucial negotiation where your whole startup is on the line and you are playing for all the marbles.
Great job to everyone who followed along with that.
Yeah, well done. So as we wrap up, let's briefly recap our three main critiques from today's analysis. First, adding comparative nuance to the definitions to show advanced learners exactly how an idiom differs from its simpler, more common counterpart.
Second, weaving the introductory pop culture hook, like that awesome pirate movie, throughout the vocabulary examples to create cohesive, continuous engagement.
And third, scaffolding the breakout room prompts with specific role-play scenarios to force the active recall of complex vocabulary, rather than just letting learners coast in their unstructured comfort zones.
By implementing these specific pedagogical adjustments, the creator will elevate this material from a simple, isolated vocabulary list into a highly engaging, retention-focused language journey.
It moves the learner entirely away from passive reading and thrusts them into active, contextualized application.
Which is exactly what we want.
So, we invite the creator to implement these creative suggestions and submit their revised material back to the show for further constructive critique.
We'd love to see the next iteration.
And to everyone listening who is designing instructional material, if you're handing your learners the keys to a high-performance sports car, make sure you give them the nuance, the narrative, and the structured practice they need to finally get out of first gear. Until next time.